Hi, welcome to another edition of New Wine Uncorked. We are here and we are stoked to be talking with Chase and about faith and wrestling and what's going on in today's world. Phil?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? We have Chase Pommy on the line here, and you have a wrestling academy. Tell us about your wrestling academy, your hopes for the future of the academy.
Yeah, so I just moved from across the country about a month ago from Philadelphia. I was coaching at the University of Pennsylvania for the last 4 years, and prior to that, I'd actually I'd grown up in Las Vegas and was born and raised here, and went on to college, wrestled in California at Cal Poly, and was a multiple time All-American. And then I moved on and wrestled for Team USA on multiple USA teams. Traveled all around the world and the country, and got a chance to really be a part of be a part of something special and exciting, and got to do all that. And then I moved on to coaching at the Division I level, and I kind of found out in the process that wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. I gained a lot of skills and a lot of knowledge, and kind of being able to help me transition to the next phase of my life. But I always knew I kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit. I enjoy the idea of building something, and I've always had the dream to do this. And it's something that I felt comfortable taking a risk in, and seeing what can come of it. So I just launched Gold Rush Wrestling Academy about a month ago here in Las Vegas. And really for Vegas, it's not a big wrestling hotbed, so to speak. Nevada's not a big hotbed for wrestling. There are good kids that have come out of here and done well, but I think there's an ability for it to really go to another level. And part of my hope in bringing this here is just creating that opportunity for kids to have these experiences that I had, and experience the world. But also it's important to kind of develop the whole person, right? I talk to my athletes and my parents, and we haven't really gotten going full steam yet with kind of everything in the midst of COVID. But, I talk a lot about our mission and some of our values, and really our mission is digging for gold on and off the mat, and that kind of refers to helping these kids kind of become the best versions of themselves. They're, you could be really great at wrestling, but lack in a lot of other areas. And that's not gonna cut it, at the next level. And so I take this approach of let me develop them on and off the mat, and be really intentional about it. Right. It's a hard thing to do, and it makes a lot more work, because teaching wrestling, I mean, I've done it for 23 years. That's the easy part, but really trying to help kids grow in their education, grow in giving back to the community, grow in just awareness and community of other people. Those are the lessons that really last long term, and so there's really kind of, core values are still being developed, but there's really three main core values for us that have really come out so far, and that seem like we're trending. And one of those is just communication, communication, and that's speaking truth with one another, both encouraging guys, but also being honest when there's honest conversations that need to happen, and fostering that kind of environment that athletes learn to listen. But also, even my parents, I talk about with them, open communication, between you and me, between mom and dad and me as coach, because there's so many issues that happen along the way, but I want them to feel heard, and their ability to talk to me. The long game, like I said, which prepares kids for life after wrestling. What good is it if they go on to college and they're not ready to go into the world and be an asset to the world around them. And I want people to know when kids come out of Gold Rush Wrestling, if they're being recruited to college, that, hey, they're going to be an asset in the wrestling room, but they're also going to be on the mat, but also they're going to be a great asset to the school and the community and whatever city they're in. And then the last thing I just tell my kids is maximum effort. You got to give maximum effort in the classroom, on the mat, in the community, and in your families. If one of these areas is here, right, and the other area is here, there's no that's too much discrepancy. So I really wanted to grow kids and you know, I wanted to be a youth pastor when I was younger. God ended up kind of taking me a different direction and using me in a little different way. And you know, I get to do it on a different platform now and in a different way. I mean, God's still central to every decision that I make and everything that I do, and the lens through which I look through everything. And even as I look through these core values, I try to take things from scripture and you know, even just kind of communication in Ephesians that talks about, you know, speaking truth with one another, and really tried to instill some gospel, you know, gospel values from the gospel into the foundation of this academy.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling, a lot of people probably don't think about discipleship or faith coming into it, because wrestling tends to be, we were talking before, like kind of you have to have that grit, the blue collar, you get there, you get it done. But how does faith connect with wrestling in your mind, or discipleship, or going into your core values? You're talking about communication. You're talking about being the best, you know, and 100% the maximum effort. So where does faith play into that? Maybe personally for you, like how did faith help you out with the ups and downs? I mean, for your college career, you got to the, you know, to the big stage and was just like right there. You know, how did that in the NCAA championship faith play into that, as well as like maybe in the USA Wrestling in your career there leading into the academy? How has faith been a integral part of that? And then how do you think then faith helps you kind of pour into these wrestlers right now? Mute.
That's a really sorry about that, still figuring as many Zoom calls as I've made, you know,
Doesn't,
still
man.
doing it. But you know, for me, my faith in terms of, and there's a lot of ups and downs in wrestling, right? There's a lot of, there's kind of the mountaintop experiences, there's the valleys, and there's kind of that in between, and the areas where you have to push through and areas where you have to, you know, humble your, there's so many different facets of wrestling that really do pull over to life. And a lot of it is, you know, team sports are great. I love soccer growing up, and, you know, but wrestling's an individual sport, and you know, as a wrestler, you kind of learn to, it can be really easy to rely on yourself and all you did. And because you can put in a lot of work into the sport. You don't necessarily have to be the most talented individual, but if you work hard in wrestling, you can do a lot of things with it. You can really go pretty far with it. And that's just the kind of sport that it is. But as you do this, like I said, you go up and down. And I think in life, our faith journey is like that, right? We have ups and downs and things that we can control and things that we can't control. You know, sometimes you go to a tournament and it's too cold and or the food is bad, or you had a bad weight cut. You know, I guess you can control your weight cut, but you know, maybe you know, maybe you're late. There's all these different factors you can't necessarily control in wrestling. And the same thing in the world. There's so many things that, and I mean, this COVID thing, it is really, really difficult to be a business owner just starting and stay positive, and kind of maintain a sense of, I mean, just peace in the midst of it, you know? But it's really showing me how very little control we think we have. It's an illusion, you know? And I think, being able to, in a cliche way, I don't want to say in a cliche way, but look to God and know, ideally that God knows what's best, you know, no matter what. I'm a big, Tim Keller. I mean, I enjoy reading his stuff, and I've you know, I've kind of found peace along the way in knowing that sometimes there's just bad situations that happen. And that's not to negate that, like, there's really bad situations that happen. I don't want to in any way minimize that. And there are really good situations that happen, but through all that, God's grace is in that, and God's goodness is in that in some way or another. And again, it's not to minimize, but it's a way to kind of see through some of the darker times and know that, man, like, God, maybe it was best for me not to win the national tournament my senior year and come 2 points away from achieving my dream that I worked, you know, 15, 16 years for, you know, Likewise in the world, there's just really tough things that go on. And I mean, some of it's even hard to put into words and explain, you know. I'm still processing, but I think trying to see God's grace the best possible through all of it, and kind of work through things from that perspective, you know. So you know, wrestling really has taught me how to manage those highs and how to manage those lows. And one thing I would say on top of that is just the small victories. You know, the small victories are really some of the most important things for the long game. You know, day to day, you're going to have, if you have 2 good days in a row, you know, I don't know. I don't know many people that have 2 good days in a row. You know, at least for me, if there's something wrong if there's 2 great days. But I like a little bit of that challenge, and but you've got to learn to enjoy it, celebrate the small victories. You know, in the same way in faith as well as, excuse me.
Maybe it's God.
Well, apologies to everyone watching that.
Dude.
So,
live recording, dude.
But the small victories and faith, you know, same thing with our faith is there's small wins and there's big wins that you gotta be able to take from it. You know, you're walking through a season where, man, God just feels like he's not meeting you. Well, slow down a little bit and look and say, all right, well, how has God met me? You know, what has God done? Maybe I started here and I want to be here. I'm not here yet, but I'm here because God has kind of met me in these little victories along the road. God brought me from here to here, you know, and little by little. But a lot of those things take faith, you know, these big things that we talk about with faith, big goals. We got to celebrate those small things and give glory to where it's due.
Yeah. How is because wrestling, like you said, wrestling is an individual sport. I mean, that was one of the things for me, because you know, soccer, you talk about soccer, the frustration is you had 10 other people that you were relying on, which is a great thing, but it's also frustrating. But then wrestling was, man, however much work you wanted to put into it, somewhat determined what was going to happen. And even in that, just like faith, you can pray and pray and pray, and you might not receive the answer. What have you found within the wrestling community that has been surprising to you or kind of shocking when it comes to faith and wrestlers?
Man, that's a good question. You know, what has been, you know, I think the guys, you know, and it's been interesting in the last 10 years or so, you see a lot of the guys that are kind of at the top in wrestling right now. And not that there's necessarily a correlation. I mean, it doesn't mean because you're a Christian that you're gonna get this, you know, there's, but I do believe there are times where God really does move through certain people and for certain seasons, and God does put people at places where really they can use their influence to really bring glory to him. And right now on the Team USA side of things, I mean, it's so encouraging, guys that are really profess their love for God and profess Jesus as Savior. I mean, one guy right now is Kyle Snyder, who was youngest Olympic champ for USA. And I mean, guy has a, you know, I'm on a text message chain with him, and man, I just see his heart for Jesus and his want to share the gospel and the humility. You know, he's never gotten so big that it's like, man, I'm too big for God, you know, I'm too big to share my faith, but he's always kind of stood by that. And I think wrestlers, not that other sports aren't, but there's just a humility factor that kind of comes with, again, being a wrestler and learning to have to really work to get what you want. And again, all sports work, all people have to work. I mean, there's some tough sports out there. Like, I mean, a baseball, I don't know if I could I don't think I could hit 104-mile-an-hour baseball, you know? So it's a different skill set, but there is a piece of wrestling where there is a humility that it is so, it's everything. You're putting your emotions, you're putting your body, you're feeling so much. There's so many dynamics of it and so many things to be able to kind of manage that maybe makes it a little bit different and a little bit unique in its own sense, that allows people to kind of grow in a way. And so you just find a lot of humility in wrestling, because it's guys that just had to work really, really hard. And again, no offense, just you're not going to get rich necessarily being a wrestler. You know, I mean, some guys it's doing better. It's definitely done better over the years where guys can make a living. But, you know, if you put kind of Jordan Burroughs, who's really the face of USA wrestling, you know, I don't know what he's made, but I mean, he's the equivalent to like a LeBron James, you know, in the NBA. And I mean, the gap is huge, you know? So it's a sport that kind of just naturally, I think, keeps you pretty humble. So.
Yeah, let me ask one follow-up here. You talked earlier, and I think Matt mentioned as well, just working with kids and discipleship, just the idea of that. Tell us a little bit about some of the students you've worked with, and just some of the good stories and not so good stories, and that whole process kind of working with some of your students that you've worked with.
Yeah, you know, one thing with my boss would always say this at Penn, you know, and I think it was, you know, it wasn't necessarily a faith statement, but it's something that really hit home with me is it's not what you taught people, it's really how you made them feel. I'm kind of paraphrasing what you'd say, but it's, you can teach people, but it's really how you make people feel is what they're going to remember, you know. And for me, one of my big values is it's people. This is people. This is why I do this. It's people. You help grow people. You help people be better, you know. And you know, for me with my college guys, as much as possible, I would always try and take a guy out to coffee every week. It wasn't perfect, but take them out and just talk to them and do life. You know, I think for one thing, being a coach, these guys are so used to seeing you on the mat, you know, and that's kind of the only relationship you have with them. And you know, maybe a little bit throughout the day in the you know, in the office, you'll see them, but very rarely do you get to just do life with these guys outside of wrestling. And that's means so much to these athletes, you know. And honestly, there's guys that I've seen, and that come back to me years later and just say how much they really appreciate that. You know, as far as stories, you know, I don't have anything maybe like specifically where an athlete, you know, really had some kind of like crazy experience, you know, but it was just all those little experiences and times where I was able to have those individual conversations one-on-one. And when they were going through the tough times, let me just say this, it made you being there in the good times a little bit easier in the tough times, versus when someone's in a tough time and you try and like reach in and people get closed off, you know, sometimes. And some of those guys were, you know, when they were really down low, it was a lot easier for me to reach in and kind of be there for them when it was a low time, you know?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I will talk when we do small groups or something for the church and we're teaching on parenting, the investment that you make early on pays dividends later when your kids, they know that you're there, kind of like with your wrestlers. If they know you're there all the time, then during the times of need, dark times, you're able to speak deeper into them because they're like, well, you've been a presence, you know. And then with the discipleship aspect and trying to pour into people, it's a different mindset with wrestling, in the sense of, I think anyone who's gone through a sport, it doesn't seem like it's that much when it's 7 minutes on the mat, you know, and yet then when someone gets in there, they're like, holy crap, that's a long 7 minutes, you know, going just these two forces going at each other, which is a mindset that you have to have. And so I'm wondering how, because one of my favorite chapters, Genesis 32, I guess the Bible should all be my favorite. But the idea of the wrestling, you know, and what Jacob did is he was forced to wrestle until he got his blessing, is what he said. I'm going to continue to go even amidst injury, and you've dealt with injury, you know. and yet you keep going on. And so the idea of that wrestling mindset, how is it possible, like if the church took that on, how could faith and wrestling kind of come together so that they see, oh my gosh, this idea of pushing for that blessing, the discipline, the grit, how does wrestling speak into faith and maybe even the church to take that on, some of the characteristics of the mindset of a wrestler?
Yeah. I think wrestling, sports people in general have an incredible ability to kind of engage their emotions in what they're doing. You have to, and sometimes it's scary because, right, like emotions are, they can be deceptive at times, right? And you can do powerful things with emotions too, just like with your thoughts. But I think athletes and I think wrestlers, again, like I said before, have the ability to really feel deeply in what they're doing. They have an ability to really like just reach down deep inside. When you're in a match and you've 7 minutes, again, like you said, it doesn't sound really like that difficult. I promise you, it is extremely difficult, when you get in there, and from a mental side, a physical side. We did some testing this year at Penn, which was really interesting. And they were kind of basically looking at wrestlers and their ability, once they're really tired, to maintain cognizance and be able to still think at a cognitive level. So basically you would do all these different tests, and then you'd wrestle, all these physical tests, then you'd wrestle, and then you'd take this, you would do this test on an iPad screen, and then you'd go right back and you'd take the test again. And basically they were trying to see what the cognizance, what it's like for wrestlers. And it got more difficult. Wrestlers got more focused. They did better on the test. Now, this is, again, a small sample size, and there's a lot of statistics and things that can be drawn for it. But kind of the overall hypothesis and idea was that this is what was happening. And I think that there's a similar kind of thing that, when Christians, when we're walking through life and it gets really difficult, as it will. It's not if, it's when. I mean, Matt, we've we've had some really difficult times together in conversations, whether it was, relationships or family. And I mean, I've cried over the phone with you and at different times in life. But it was kind of in those moments that you kind of, you get those emotions out and you just pick yourself, you look to the Lord and you pick yourself up again, and the Lord picks you up, and you look to him and remember that he's in control, and he's grace, his grace is there, and you just kind of, you kind of keep moving forward. You kind of just keep chugging forward, and you kind of just refocus, and so I think Christians, when we are down low and we are going through tough times, when it is difficult, like, man, just continuing to really look to the Lord. And it's cliche, but it's so much more difficult when you're in the moment. Keep believing and keep really working through things. And sometimes it's not one day. For me, the last 6 days have been like, man, I've just been stressed out my mind with COVID and making some decisions and as a business owner and really struggling through and fighting through these decisions. And it's kind of just each day, there's a day a couple of days ago where I just kind of leaned into my own strength, and it was just a really bad day. I was frustrated. My language wasn't right when I was on my own. I was frustrated, just being honest. I was really on edge, and I came back to the Lord that night and came back the next morning and just kind of kept chipping away little by little with the Lord. And, and now, at least for today, I have some light and some perspective on what the Lord spoke to me this morning. And, but there's just that ability, again, like I said, that as things get tougher, our focus on the Lord has to become more, we have to become more focused on the Lord and more intentional. And again, from a practical level, some people might be praying, for me, I journal almost every single day. I journal every day. That's my, my way to connect with the Lord. But even, whether it's taking 5 breaths in the morning for me and just saying, Lord, like, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Today, I can't control everything, but let your kingdom come today, and let your kingdom, you know, really be present in my life and what I'm doing. You know, whether it's a hike or different things that we find that, however we can kind of really refocus into the Lord and keep him at the forefront. Man, there's incredible ability there to do things and experience the Lord in ways that, you know, we haven't before.
It's good. That was good, Chase. Thank you for sharing that, man. Yeah. Kind of man, I had a question, and then I had a follow-up question that just went right out my ear just that way. So we'll keep going.
It's interesting when we talk about like trials, right? Trials and tribulations, because I think a lot of people before they like give their life to Jesus, there's this idea that if you say yes to Jesus, all of a sudden the trials and the tribulations are going to go away, you know. And I teach in some of my classes, or even when I preach, this mindset that when I say yes to Jesus, all of a sudden my teeth are going to get straight. I'm going to get the abs that I wanted to and the body and all that stuff, you know. And that's just not the case, right? Because the more you press into Jesus, all of a sudden, like, it sometimes feels like, whoa, you know, it's like things are going to happen that you're just like not expecting, right? You know. And yet it's like you were saying earlier, it's the strange thing about faith is that it's in the trials sometimes that you realize the goodness of the Lord, right? And I don't know if you found that with wrestling, is in your losses you actually found more about who you were as a person, and as a follower of Christ, you know. And for me, it was, as I look back, just not only in my faith but like with wrestling and things, the times that I lost, I feel like, gosh, that actually was a good time. In the midst of it, it sucked. It blew, right? And you're just like, oh man, you want to, if it's a loss, like I can't imagine losing the national championship. You just want to throw and break things and stuff. And yet you look back at those moments, you go, wow, I really grew not only as a person, but in my faith, you know. And so with the trials, I don't know how you pour into your kids now or into the college guys, but how is it that you teach that in the midst of the downtimes, actually this can be a moment of goodness?
Good question. You know, and I think that kind of goes back to the small victories, Matt. You know, one of my biggest mistakes, I would say, as a competitor, and most difficult things, especially on the Team USA level, when you kind of went from, you know, I was good in high school, I was good in college, you know, as a top guy, and you go to the international level. I mean, the amount that separates. I mean, you're talking about the best of the best in the world. You're wrestling the best in the world. The amount that separates guys is often just inches. It really is a game of inches, and it's that little inch to close that inch on somebody who's better than you at that level is extremely difficult. I mean, there's just, you know, and going into it, I didn't understand that. And even as a competitor in my later years, I finally started to understand that, dude, you're trying to do something really, really difficult here. It's not like, you know, what you did in college is going to work in this season. And we've all heard people in church say that, right? Like, what you used last season, you know, to defeat the enemy isn't going to work in this season, right? Like you gotta develop. There's certain base things that you'll use, but the enemy's tricky at times, man. And the things that come our way, again, it's so tricky to be able to manage through and go through. I just lost my train of thought. What I was saying there, but as a competitor, you know, I was always looking at, oh, I wanted the big win. I wanted this win. I wanted that win. I wanted this or that. And I would get so discouraged because I was constantly so focused on winning, that when I lost, I couldn't take losing. I couldn't take lessons from losing really well, you know, because I had such big expectations of what I wanted to do. And when I lost, it was like the world was falling down, you know. And I said earlier that idea of small victories. In every loss, there's small victories and big losses too. There's small victories in there. There's things to improve upon, and You know, and sometimes you lose, and sometimes you lost because they were just better, and sometimes there's guys that are just that much better, you know. And sometimes you lose because you made mistakes and you messed up in your training, or there's all these different things. Let me also say, like, that also applies to winning as well. Like, you could win, but there's also a lot of failures in there that kind of can keep you humble as well. You know, the best guys can look at winning and losing very similarly, can look at winning and see, like, okay, well, I did some great things here. I did A, B, and C, but I also have ability to continue to improve A, B, and C here. And that's how they keep on guys keep building, you know? And so I like this terminology, fail forward. You know, I really like that terminology. And even in my faith, you know, it's difficult, you know, it's difficult. It's, on a lot of different levels. I mean, 33-year-old man, single, challenging, you know, opportunities that come your way, challenging. You see things on the news today, challenging, you know, your heart gets sick and hurt and angry, and family, you know, challenging, really difficult, you know, things that make you, you know, say things out loud sometimes, or think things or do things. You kind of just, you know, you fail. But that's the amazing thing about God's grace and his net is, like, man, I fail forward, but his net's right here. And because I fail doesn't mean I need to, like, drop all the way down here and now I need to start all fresh and now I got to climb back up. But we fail forward and Jesus just meets us. And when we fall into that grace and we fall into that net, you know, I think God just kind of catches us. You know, God, you know, forgive me, Lord. I know I messed up, and God's graceful and says, as far as your, you know, sins are from the east is from the west, you're forgiven, and catches you. And you kind of just keep going, you know, you fail forward, Lord catches you, you keep moving forward. And that's just the amazing thing of, like, just God's grace and God's word and who he is. And you know, just the ability to fail, right? That takes so much stress and pressure off of us. Especially for people who are perfectionists, you know, but learning that, man, no matter what, when I fail, I mess up, man, God catches me, and I can repent, and I can just keep on moving forward, and the Lord is there for me in that. So
yeah, dude, we totally appreciate you taking the time to just hang out with us. For those of you, I know with the COVID-19 issue right now, I'm not sure exactly what's going on with the, you know, coming in wrestling, like you were saying earlier. But for people who want to get some information, right here on the screen, you see goldrushwrestling.com. You could just go to the page. I'm sure there's a way to contact Chase. Is there a way probably to email you or something just to get information?
Yep.
There's the information on here for who Chase is and the academy for those of you that are wanting to know more about wrestling. But more than anything, man, Chase, we totally appreciate you hanging out with us, talking about faith and wrestling and just who you are as a person. Because I think, like you were saying with your wrestlers, same thing with the church, is that the church is only as strong as how relationally connected we are, you know. And so when we're willing to step into each other's lives, then we can step out into culture and embrace one another. I mean, that's what John 17 is all about, right? It says that the world will know that the Father sent the Son by the way in which you guys love one another, that you're unified. And so that happens when we're all having these dialogues. And so Phil and I are super stoked that you took the time out to, you know, hang out with us and our audience and everything. So for those of you that are watching, be sure down on the description, we'll have some more information about Gold Rush Wrestling as well as who Chase is. And make sure you subscribe right there on the bottom, right next to Chase. You'll see right there the button to subscribe to New Wine Uncorked on YouTube, because that way you'll be given the latest updates as well. When we upload these videos, you'll be first to know what's going on at New Wine. So on behalf of Chase and Phil, I'm Matt Farlow, and this is New Wine Uncorked. Until the next time, we'll see you on the flip side.
Peace.